That you know more people. I hate normal people more than anybody else. I hate you, normal people, more than anybody else. I hate you, normal people, more than anybody else. Anybody else.
Welcome to Joan of Art, the weekly podcast where we investigate and celebrate people who make art.
Dear madam, dear sir, dear madam, dear sir, dear madam, dear sir, dear madam, dear sir, dear madam, dear sir.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5 of Joan of Art. I'm super excited. Today is going to be a super fun show to all you 10 million listeners out there. We have some really special guests with us here today. We have Lisa Lee Polivka, who is a costume and set designer, a multidisciplinary artist, a super good friend of mine. Tim Carroll, who also is an artist, an installation artist, a multidisciplinary artist as well. Both of these folks worked for a really long time at the soap factory, but they've done a million things, and they're here to talk with us today about the MUMA project. And I also have Caitlin Krolchek with us, who is an incredible painter who spends half time here in Minnesota and time in New York City. So welcome to our show. Thanks for listening. This is going to be a great hour. So hey, Lisa Lee and Tim, I'm going to start with you guys today. Lisa Lee, I just want to quick talk about how we met because it was fun. You inquired, I think it was like in 2011. You kind of, I don't know how we even met each other, honestly.
Ooh, I do.
So you were inquiring if I wanted to be a part of the Haunted Basement, which was an initiative at the Soap Factory Gallery in Northeast. That was a haunted amusement in the basement of their huge factory. And you were kind of thinking maybe I would want to do some costume stuff, but instead I did a room. But you were there for the beginning. And do you want to just tell us really quickly about what your role was and, I don't know, whatever?
What wasn't my role probably in all those years? Soap cleaner, basement cleaner, seeing soap in every format in that basement. The first couple of years, it was just a small crew of us that got together and kind of, let's have a haunted house in the basement of the soap factory. And it really snowballed quick, just in a matter of years into what it is now. And I've built sets, built costumes, had interns, did makeup, did laundry, kind of a little bit of everything with that project. So
yeah. And how many people were there at the beginning? Do you remember? It was like 5 people?
Maybe 10, a good solid 10.
Yeah. And I remember a story that you told me, I don't know if it was the first year or the second year, that the line became wrapped around the building and you guys, like, it was like over capacity and people started freaking out.
We had like a mini riot. We had to like make a sign on a tarp with spray paint that said sold out. It was so punk rock, and people were like practically rioting, and that was what turned into the next year the pre-purchase tickets.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
We're gonna have to get a handle on
So we were like,
this.
ooh, we got to figure out how to deal with this. So that whole project was really a lot of that because none of us really knew what was going to happen when that started.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of how some of the best things go.
Yeah, it was fun. Some of the most fun years. Mm-hmm. Great group of people.
And Tim, you also were involved with the soap factory a lot.
That's how we met.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell that story. I don't mind if I put you on the spot here. Do you remember, Tim?
Well, actually, Lisa Lee and I have a lot of mutual friends, and we both kind of go back to the old Mala days, which was a performance space and a collective, and they had the Bat Annex, which was sort of a educational facility where you could learn to sew, or you could learn, well, a large variety of crafting.
They had like a library.
Yeah, a library.
Made by normal people.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which I hate. Just kidding.
Me too. Books.
I started doing the basement. Actually, Lisa Lee encouraged me to do the basement. And in those days, our dressing room was half as big as the room we're sitting in, which nobody can see.
It was just a table.
It was a table and a broken mirror.
Oh.
And literally.
A light bulb.
And a light bulb.
Oh.
Now they have a full green room with bathrooms and laundry and the whole bit. And yay, I'm really, really glad that, they got to that level. But there was something really DIY fun about like 7 of us getting dressed in that tiny space and sharing, random makeup that was donated. And I don't know. I miss those days.
Sexy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember the costume I decided to wear was a women's slip that had no back to it, and I put red makeup paint all over my ass.
Wow.
And I walked over to Lisa Lee and I said, "Will this be okay?"
And what was your response?
Of course, hell yeah. Looks great.
What was your character supposed to be?
Sort of like that guy in The Silence of the Lambs, except funnier.
I thought it was a lady, maybe.
Well, I don't know. It was a guy
Some
in a,
gender bending going on
There was
there.
a guy in a dress. Yeah.
That's great. I don't know. I came to the haunted basement like way after all of that, so I got to experience that whole green room. And I think the year that I did the basement, you were in full like costume design. You did like these vintage Halloween costumes that
Yep.
were like there's a history of them being not flame retardant, and so kids would
Yeah.
like burn alive.
Yeah, when they first started mass producing Halloween costumes, they weren't flame retardant, and the masks were like a light gauze, and all the, pumpkins had real candles and stuff, so kids were getting burned, and we made burn victims, and I actually reproduced 1930s Halloween costumes from the box and made masks that look like the original masks, and hand painted all of the Little Orphan Annie logos and stuff on them and Mickey Mouse, and then made them look like they were burnt, and then had Brett Dorian was our awesome makeup artist that year, and she recreated burns on the actors and stuff, and like boils.
And there were some people that were really pissed off because they thought that she had destroyed vintage costumes.
Because they were so well
They were
done.
so-
And that was
well
such a compliment. I was like, no costumes were hurt in the making of this costume.
And then you got a cease and desist order from Disney.
Not yet, but now that it's on air.
No, I remember that being super creepy. I mean, I think you've always had a really good handle on that. You've liked creepy stuff way before Haunted Basement. I mean, I think like you've got kind of a little bit.
I have a dark side. Tim actually and I, Tim helped me a lot with the set for that room too. There was all these wood pallets that were kind of taking over the basement at that point, and they weren't sturdy enough to make anything or use as bookshelves or kind of reuse for anything. So Tim helped me with a saw, chop them all up into shake shingles. And
Oh, wow.
the set for that was actually a burned down house, and it was the exterior and the interior. So all of the shingles on the outside were cut by Tim.
Nice.
That was seriously one of the I can think of a top 5 in all the years of the basement sets. And Joan, yours is I don't know, maybe number 1.
No.
But this comes close. I mean, this was so well done.
Well, that was the same year.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was.
yeah.
That was
Oh,
a
yeah.
great year.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was an
Yeah.
incredible experience. It was that was one of my first things that I did moving here from Brooklyn. So I met all of you and really made a good base of people and artists to work with.
And look at you now.
I know.
Tell them about what you did for it.
Yeah, so you were asking me to do maybe some costume design or maybe some set design stuff, but instead I decided that I just wanted to recreate my family's living room circa 1972, which was scary enough to be. And it people still remember it. It was basically a Super 8 film that I discovered that was shot in 1972 or thereabouts. And it's my family sitting around kind of on an Easter Sunday all dressed up with their kids all dressed up, and they're passing around a loaded pistol and drinking lowballs. And so we recreated the exterior of the house and the interior of the house, and then had characters who played the characters in the film and had the films, streaming or, whatever on the wall, projecting on the wall. And then there was a starter pistol, so with each patron experience, which was every 3 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
At some point, the gun would go off. So it was disturbing in a way that's kind of real, in ways that people don't really talk about how scary domestic violence is, and you probably aren't used to experiencing that in a haunted amusement. So I think it was more on the disturbing side, but people seem to like that.
Yeah, and the set was beautifully done.
It was weird because I found so many things that because my living room was filled with cheap, shit that ended up in the thrift stores. So I went thrifting and I found the replica of the ducks flying overhead or whatever, and almost the same exact couch and almost the same exact record players.
costumes, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really, really, really a crazy experience. Anyway, so you guys have both worked on the storefront project a lot. Gotta thank you for that. You've been there from the beginning too. You both seem to like to do things from the beginning. Like you both seem to get involved in things that have this like kind of, I don't want to say totally DIY feeling, but this people power more than institutional power. And I think that that's what's really interesting about the project that you're collaborating on now is that you're harnessing that people power and your networks and word of mouth and all of these things that you're both very, very good at to create something within an institution. So I want to talk about this project because it's cool and exciting. It's called MUMA. What does that stand for?
MUMA stands for the Minnesota Underground Music Archives.
Awesome. And so where is this housed, this archive?
This is at the Elmer L. Anderson Library, which is located on the west bank of the U of M. It's a state-of-the-art facility, which is worth noting because there's other archive centers across the country. Berkeley has a huge one. There's many on the East Coast. But none of them have the facility that we have here. This was built from the ground up in the late 90s to be a specific humidity-controlled, temperature-controlled, underground archive.
And it's like 7 floors underground or something like that, right?
Well, I think it's like 4 stories underground.
Wow.
You have to enter it through an air chamber. It's like going into an episode of the X-Files. Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating. The section we're in is the Performing Arts Archive. The facility holds the Givens Collection, which is an African American literary collection. They have a huge social justice, the history of social justice collection. They also have the distinction of housing the largest Sherlock Holmes collection in the world, because a guy who bought the collection at auction in London as one whole lot willed it to our facility.
Whoa.
So it's, if you want to do any research on Sherlock Holmes, we got it.
That's incredible. How in the heck did you guys find this resource?
Was that from Jack?
Yeah, it was from Jack. Definitely
Yeah.
from Jack.
Okay, tell us about it.
Lisa Lee and I were helping this guy, Jack Edwards, sort of downsize and transition into elder care.
Who is Jack Edwards?
Jack Edwards was the costume director of the Guthrie Theater for 18 years. He also did all the costume work for Dayton's 8th Floor Christmas shows. He was on the original founding committee for Holodazzle. But he also, before he lived here, he worked on Broadway with people like Cecil Beaton and Richard Burton.
Bob Mackie. He did some Carol Burnett show.
Yeah. In fact, Joan, you
Santa
have...
Fe Opera.
Santa Fe Opera? He was
Which
there before.
burned down. They
yeah.
don't have anything from it except for some drawings.
Wow.
Yeah. So we discovered that he had a mountain of archivables. I mean, he had drawings and diaries and photographs and playbills and overwhelming amount of stuff. So what to do, you know? So we resourced the U and kind of figured out who to call. And we called Cecily Marcus, who's the director of the Performing Arts Division. And we barely got it out of our mouths who we were talking about and what we had before she said, "I will be right over."
Oh, wow.
And she was literally right over. It was about this time of year, sweltering hot. She was about to have her babies. She
Wow.
was as pregnant as could be. But she took the time to come all the way out to Lake Minnetonka and investigate. And she said, "Don't throw away anything." And she was serious.
So is she like a trained historian or an archivist? I know that that's actually a profession. Like you can get, a degree in...
You know, I'm not sure about all of her background
Right.
entirely.
She's obviously very passionate about it.
She's
She's been
passionate.
really happy to find you two because you guys keep it coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Minnesota Underground Music Archive is a special... It's like got its own place within the Anderson Archive in the Performing Arts section. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you guys are curating. And so tell me about some of the things that are there now.
Currently, we've got a great collection from the Hippograph.
Oh, yeah.
Disco pictures of disco bands signed by the bands that were all in the Hippograph's owner's office originally. So they were bought in an auction as a lot. So those are donated.
And so that was from like the 70s or the 80s or
70s.
70s.
Totally
oh
70s.
my God, that must
Totally
be so fun
70s.
to look at.
They're amazing.
And I'm glad Caitlin's here because her partner Peter and they're the ones who actually donated these materials to us.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And we're really grateful because getting a lot of the stuff we're getting it's a challenge, and getting people to let go of things that they have can be some work to do. But we can get a lot of like punk rock and rock and roll,
Right.
Trying to find little esoteric pieces of the music industry, like these disco pictures.
In the past too. We
Yeah.
don't just. I mean, we want things from now, but we also want to kind of dig back into the past and like get those things that people have been holding on to for decades. Because we've already encountered a couple times in like approaching people about giving things that they're like, oh, I just threw out so much stuff like 2 months ago,
That's too bad.
and that's like our worst.
What you're trying to avoid, you're
Yeah,
trying to
we're
prevent
like,
that from happening.
Give it to us.
Right. So you guys are collecting. I know that my husband just gave you a huge tape cassette box filled with all of his like recordings and practices, but you're also looking for the ephemera too, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so like flyers, posters, album art. I mean,
We've got some master tapes. We've got 7 inches. We've got records. We've got tapes.
Venus de Mars, a local musician and artist, she as a single entity gave us a huge collection of her work, going back like 35 years, 40 years almost.
yeah, Venus was our guest last week, so she mentioned that she was one of the first. She was one of the first people to really unload.
The prized possession that she turned over is a bloody set list from a show she did in, I think, New Zealand. Or
With all the pretty
Australia.
horses?
Yeah, with all the pretty horses. And part of her act involves a grinder that a dancer will turn on and then buzz onto a codpiece that she's wearing, and it makes sparks. And
It's a metal codpiece,
a metal
right?
codpiece, yeah. Yeah. Well, something went awry in the process that night.
Oh, dear.
And she got cut on the arm, and the blood just was going everywhere. Consummate professional, the show must go on. So she just kept bleeding and singing, and she bled all over the set list. So we have this wonderful bloody set list.
Just wonderful.
Was there any footage of that?
I don't know.
I think
That'd be
that was
cool.
like in the time where it's like rare to get footage from back then.
Yeah, I think that's hard. Are you getting any like footage or videos or stuff like that?
Some would like more, and if you have it on VHS, we've been using a company called Saving Tape, which is here in Minneapolis, and they can convert old VHS tape into a thumb drive with .mov files, which are extraordinary because they're large.
Right.
And then we can turn those into smaller files or keep them in the archive. Copy them.
So walk me through the process, because let's say we have somebody out there listening who says, oh my God, my band was like huge in the 70s and I have all of this stuff and I played all these different venues across town. How do I get my stuff into the archive? What do I do?
If it's a small amount of stuff, we have 2 places where people can drop stuff off if it's just a couple random things. One of them is Extreme Noise Records on East Lake, and the other one is...
And that's right. That's Lake and Lindale, right?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a couple blocks east of Lindale.
Okay.
And then the other one is we have a big shiny red box that says Muma Donations at Hard Times Cafe on the West Bank on Riverside, and we check that every week or 2 and pull things out of it. It's big enough for records and 11 by 17 posters if they're rolled up.
You guys just set that up.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
brand new.
Did you?
We're gonna look at it
Okay.
this week.
I'm like, have you got anything? That must be so much fun, like a treasure hunt.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're hoping.
That's great.
Otherwise, if you have a larger collection, it's probably best to just get a hold of us through Facebook, messaging.
Right.
Because if it was a bigger collection, that'd be something where we'd probably want to meet up and just have it all brought at once, and then they would have to sign a gift deed.
Deed of gift, yeah.
So, okay, so then I've got this big collection. I contact you guys. We meet up. I'm definitely going to donate it. I'm interested. Do I ever get to see those materials again? Are they just gone forever? Or what happens to them?
You would retain copyright if that applied to any of the materials that you're donating, or if they're items that aren't your personal copyrightables, so to speak. You still have, you don't have ownership. You're basically turning them over to us. We're curating them, and then we are donating them to the archive. So it's a bit of a little process on our end, but it's just the way we have to do it. You will always be able to have primary sourcing. You can come in and borrow your items back if you need them for a show or an exhibit. kind of thing. You don't just walk in and get them. You have to go through a process.
Right.
But you can always get your materials on loan back to you again.
If you're ever feeling sentimental, you can always like request some time with anything from the archives in the reading room, which you can do with anything that's in there. But if you're donating something and you're like, oh, I feel nostalgic, I want to go look at this picture I gave them, you can like make an appointment to go touch it and like spend time with it, make copies of it, take pictures on your phone, like whatever you need to do, or
Whatever
so it's
you're
like
inspired
you
to
have
do.
access to it, but it's just different access.
But okay, so then the flip side of all of this is like, so 150 years from now, a 17-year-old kid can walk into the archive and they can find stuff that was made in Minnesota in the 1970s. And that's like the beauty of what you guys are doing, because you're taking collections that maybe, God forbid, somebody dies, their kids don't understand the legacy that they've left behind. They look at these boxes of tapes and movies and albums and posters and they say, oh, let's just get rid of this. There's nowhere for it to go.
Well, and the big part for me is that I don't want to think that people, it's like how when we look back on something from 100 years ago, like a magazine or photographs, we're only getting kind of like this small window of what life was like. And this kind of like gives a different window that's not going to be like seen in the mainstream. Like this is stuff that you're not going to see just Google imaging on the net, or this is like digging a little deeper. Like I don't want people in 100 years to think that like top 40 music was all that everyone in the world listened to.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't either.
And some of my favorite books that I have in my book collection were actually books that people had donated some things to archives, and then someone found it 50 years later and turned it into a book. Otherwise, like I would have never even had that book. So that's like how archives can kind of re-push things back into the world that would have otherwise just been like forgotten.
And you guys, I think, I'm assuming that this is something that all three of you actually have in common. You guys are all collectors of some kind.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, Lisa Lee, you collect books. What are some of the things you like to collect?
Ooh, miniatures, books, baby dolls, creepy things.
Yeah, your house is fun to go to. It's like a mini museum. And Tim, you collect stuff too, and know a lot about collections. You actually help people sell their collections. That's like one of your expertise.
Yeah, and actually, this is something that Caitlin and Peter at Spinario Design have been doing much longer than I've been doing. And I enjoy working with them because I'm always learning more and more about, how best to do that process. I think a lot of times people wait too long and, Grandpa died and, oh no, we have to go, and all the relatives live in, Iowa and they don't want to deal with it, You have to set it up and have an estate sale, or maybe find places that your items should go to. In our case, Grandpa was a punk rocker.
Right.
Awesome.
But you also help. I think there needs to be a window of time to do that thoughtfully, because I think people just it's like a time thing and it's a burden.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, like 90% of that stuff will be tossed out. I've worked on several estate sales where they're just throwing stuff out, and I'm literally digging through the garbage. Like I've found like a $3,000 piece of art that someone threw in the garbage because they thought it was garbage.
Wow.
And then there's been other cases where I found like old Halloween snapshots from like the negatives, probably from the 40s or 50s.
Whoa.
Well, you know what? The guy who was doing the estate sale, though, he wouldn't let me save them. He was like, they're personal family stuff. You have to they're going in the garbage. And he literally like took them from me. And I was like, But this stuff happens all the time. And you do find extremely personal stuff from, dead people's estates.
Right.
I've seen really strange stuff, and I wish I would have kept more of it. Like one time there was this guy who it was probably in the 40s, and he was a part of this church group where they were like elders in the church, and they had figured out like another person was having an affair, and they actually had like all these sheets where the time was like they're like at such and such time on February 12th, you were seen going into so and so's house, and it's like all laid out, and it was super creepy. And I was like, ugh. And then but it was like all this paperwork, and I didn't save it, and it was probably like 7 years ago. Now I'd be like, I'm making this into art, you know?
It's like a private investigator's log.
Yeah, no, it was super creepy, but it's just like you see all sorts of stuff, and I think that's probably why most people's inclination is to throw it away immediately.
It's like they don't even want to see it.
Yeah.
But I mean, who's to say those personal things? Like, who's to say that like negatives or whatever? I mean, that Halloween that's not damaging to anybody. That's,
It was a super uptight estate sale
They're
guy.
not all
and
that
then
way.
you're sometimes you're working closely with lawyers from the bank, and they do get really weird about stuff. So, I mean, it's just unfortunate unless someone in the family really is like, oh, this should be saved. Oftentimes, the estate, whoever's doing the estate, the bank, they'll just feel it's safer to toss it all.
There's no liability that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, because one of the other collections we have that I really love in MoMA is Bill Caron. He passed away a little over a year ago. He was basically a fan of music. He was also a super smart computer programmer. But in the evenings, he'd be the first guy to go to 7th Street Entry or some kid's basement, wherever the show was. He would go and he would document in video and still photography and save set lists and handbills and posters. And he made these gorgeous binders where every show would be represented with its poster, its handbill, maybe its ticket stub, or if it was just some kid's basement, notation of where it was, you know.
Wow.
Beautifully done.
Presentation was like really great.
Really, really great. Really
Wow.
good. But when he passed away, his only, his mother was alive, but she didn't live here. His daughter was alive, but she didn't live here. She kind of had control of the estate, and she's a lovely, lovely, lovely young woman, but a little over her head, I think. She was like 22, and now I'm the executor of an estate?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do?
So did you get your claws on her?
Oh, well, I tried to be as delicate as possible, but as firm as possible, and this was at the memorial, and I just quietly...
How tacky, Tim.
I
Just
know,
kidding.
I know. But you know what? She's been great, and she was really glad. She said, I don't know what to do with this stuff of Dad's. It wasn't interesting for her. She appreciated what he did, but she was like, I don't...
How do you know? How do you know where
Well,
it should
yeah.
even be
Yeah.
or what to do?
I don't have room for volumes of Dad's weird
Yeah.
collections.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
don't-
not like it's valuable. It's not like they can just put it on eBay,
No.
and it's
No.
like no one's gonna,
Yeah.
at this point, no one,
Yeah.
so.
Right. So we now he has his own subcategory. So we're Performing Arts 115, and he is Performing Arts 115.
B or C.
Was that a learning curve to learn how they sort of delegate and organize things
Oh,
in the
yeah.
archive?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it still is with us because, first is bringing it there. And then the second thing is putting it into archival folders and, like, labeling those correctly. And then after that's done, we put it in a spreadsheet. And then we've been really meticulous about descriptions and tagging as much as we can about each poster, like trying to figure out like the date and the year with a lot of them. So we do a lot of research on the data entry part of it. We'll sit there and I'll be typing in and we're like, some of the things that we have to say out loud are things that they just never hear in that library because we're like,
This has excrement on it.
Or just the band names.
You have like rubber gloves and you're rustling through.
It
stuff.
could be a band like Ballsack and the Cunt Fuckers. Or like,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
And we're like, how did they spell it?
and you're like, did they spell cunt with a K or a C?
Well, we have to do that. And
Yeah.
then, I'll be typing it in, and then Tim will be on a separate computer, like trying to figure out what year it was, because we can do that, with the access to the internet. So we're trying to be really thorough about like putting in as much information so that hopefully when this makes it live on their finding aid, people can really find things and find everything we have with like a certain band or person.
And maybe you guys don't, you already sound like you're doing so much, but I just think about how archives are constantly changing also, like just because of all the mediums and how they change. Like, what is the format that everything gets saved on? It's jump drives or thumb drives or what? I'm really dumb about this stuff.
Right now, if you have items that you can save for us on a thumb drive or jump drive, whatever, in as large of a format as possible, we don't know in 50 years what can be done or what can't be done. So we can only do what we can do now to the best of the ability.
Right.
So the larger files on a thumb drive are great because eventually we'll be able to digitize from the thumb drive.
Right.
And that's if you have items that, the item doesn't exist. You just have pictures of the item or a video or something like that. We love getting actual ephemera.
Right.
Always. That's like the number one thing,
I mean, ideally, if someone was going to give us a tape or a VHS, and if they could, before they bring it to us, get it put on a thumb drive, that's like extra ideal. So we've got the hard copy, the real object, and then we've already got it halfway processed to a digital format.
It cuts your job in half.
Well, it cuts our job in half, and the archives are already like struggling to like maintain enough money to keep the current space that they have open and keep all these things safe. They're also trying to make more space to collect more things.
So that's
and then
challenging.
They're also trying to raise money to digitize what they already have and digitize like what they're getting donated now. So it's like that's a lot of freaking money.
Yeah. That's a big battle to wage.
It is. It's definitely been like, how do we make them money and get them stuff? It's like you want to just give it all, everything, but
it has to be sustainable.
And you have to like talk to people about it and like get people's interest that it's an important thing,
Right.
In David Byrne's book about biking across America, he says when he bikes across America, he sees what's important to communities by what's in them. Mm-hmm. And I think like something like that's like a perfect example. Like if your community is just like a big Target and a Caribou Coffee and big box stores, you've pushed everything out that has like
charm and meaning and history.
You see what's important to people in a certain community by what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point. We get some sort of hardcore radical folks say, I'm not going to give you my stuff because the man is bringing me down. You're going to institutionalize my grindcore punk rock motherfucking life. And it's like, well, dude, if we don't, no one's ever going to know about it because when you die, no one's going to care about your punk rock life unless we have something to show future generations and hopefully explain that, your punk rock life was important in a way that is better defined by showing it through materials.
You're not a sellout for donating to Muma.
Not at all.
Right. And I just want to bring up the fact that you guys are doing this completely on a volunteer basis. So this is just a passion of yours. You're not getting any kickbacks.
Nope.
Wow. That's amazing.
We just spent $82 making the box for Hard Times. So please support us and put your items in the box.
So you have a Facebook page, right? Is it Muma or is it Minnesota Underground Music?
You can type in Muma and it comes up.
Okay, cool. So go to that page, like it. I want to thank Lisa Lee Polivka and Tim Carroll for coming in to talk about this. They're going to stick around because they're buddies with Caitlin too, right? So maybe we can pick on you a little bit next.
Sure.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening to the Joan of Art podcast. We will be right back.
The term foodie can sometimes come across as a tickle pretentious. BT and Lydia are here to demystify the term and reclaim it for the sake of good food. Their weekly podcast brings in fellow foodies and culture creators from the Twin Cities to talk about all things food. Find this duo only on the Alive and Social Network.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back online, along comes this hit show.
Do you want to do this? I will do this.
Gaby, let's not battle our guests.
You're being nice.
Yeah. In a world full of hit shows, this one's the real deal.
I'm refusing to engage in an argument that doesn't exist.
I'm not arguing.
Twin Cities hit show.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Hey,
See, this is how fights start on pedal pubs. This is exactly. He's just all that redheaded anger just came up. It's all in his chest right now.
The Twin Cities Hit Show airs live daily, 9:30 to 10:30 on the Alive and Social Network.
Oh, Shannon, welcome to my world.
Hey, welcome back to the Joan of Art podcast, where we investigate and celebrate people who make art. We just had an awesome conversation with Lisa Polivka, Tim Carroll, and Caitlin Krolchuk. We were talking about lots of things about the stuff that Tim and Lisa Lee do, but also the MUMA project. So I hope that everyone will go and check that out. But now I kind of want to turn my focus onto you, Caitlin Krolchuk, who joins us. Hi, welcome to Joan of Art. I have known you for a while now. We've collaborated on a couple of things. You were daring, and you're a painter.
Yes.
I have to tell this story because I think it's really funny.
Okay.
When I first invited you to do artists in storefronts, we got a venue that was like kind of high profile, and it was a new sort of expansion of artists in storefronts. So it was at Ice House.
And it was pretty visible, and they have a really good storefront.
Right.
So.
It was like a perfect palette. And it also, even like just the colors and everything about it was just really suited the palettes that you used too. And anyway, so we decided, a lot of times, a lot of your paintings have penises in them.
Yeah.
And so we talked to the owners about having this really beautiful, huge painting.
Yeah, and it was one, like I do male nudes, and some are more challenging than others. And this one was not very challenging at all. And in fact, his penis was hardly visible.
Right. It was like really tame.
It was an afterthought. But it's just kind of a repeat of my experience in restaurants and whatever. So now I'm always like, oh, I don't show those paintings in restaurants.
In public.
Because I've even had people be all like, oh, I really specifically like this painting. I want this one to be hung up. And I'm like, well, are you sure? Because you're a restaurant and maybe this is not good for a restaurant. And they're like, no, we're cool. And I'm like, okay. So then I put it up, and then like a week later, they're like, Caitlin,
come and take it down?
Can you come get your painting? We've had some complaints.
And it's always like, and it's so sad because it's like, I know that the owners were really supportive, and we really were careful with them. Like, we sent emails, talked in person, and even like, when we showed up to install, we're like, are you sure, you're sure, you're sure? And I think they're sure, but then the public is like, oh my God, my 5-year-old doesn't know what a penis looks like, or something.
Yeah. My 5-year-old was born without a penis.
Anyway, it's really frustrating though, because it's like it would be so.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and you're a good sport about it, but I think that you walk through any museum and that's not anything that anybody like.
Yeah,
and so it's really hard to be able to share this content that's really beautiful and really important. And
well, and I do a lot more than that too, which
sure.
is, I would say, maybe the more frustrating thing that I'm experiencing at this point is different boards or whatever, they will be like, oh, we really like your work and you totally deserve a show, but our audience is too general for you. And it's kind of ridiculous because I don't need to show like anatomical works. I can show lots of different things.
You do lots of things, right? Yeah.
So it's a little insulting.
So I think with it, we should maybe back up, and this will be your favorite part, but let's talk about what is some of the content that you have in your paintings, which are, I have to say, really lovely. Your work is some of my favorite that I've ever seen. I'm always amazed at your technical abilities and at the feeling and the unique style that you have. But just tell us a little bit about what you derive from and what they look like.
Well, they're mostly figural, and I use a lot of different painting techniques and a lot of layering and a lot of different color combinations, and they're really they take me a lot of time usually because it's just lots of layers, and then you remove layers and add layers, and that's how you get that translucent look that some old masters used. And then there's abstract techniques where you can add different mediums to different things. So anyways, I'm just experimenting all the time. And as far as my subject matter goes, since it is figural, I will often have, a portrait or some sort of a person, and they're often making eye contact with the viewer. And I think that's like what I like to tell people is that they aren't passive. They're interacting with the viewer, and that's why some people might find some of them more challenging, because they're not just a decoration on the wall. They're kind of interacting with you a little bit more, and sometimes they are disturbing because, especially with nudes, I mean, you can go look at sexy nudes wherever you want. You can go pick up a Vanity Fair or a Playboy or this or that, but if I'm going to do a nude, I want it to be beautiful, but also maybe a little disturbing, where the viewer's like, oh, that's a little off, or why do I like looking at this? Because it's creepy.
Yeah, some of the content does have kind of a darker feeling, and I know that you've derived some of it from.
And a lot of it's anatomical. Like, I love old anatomical illustrations, and I like the human body and the different systems of the human body and the skeletal system. So I'm kind of playing off a lot of those 17th century engravings you'll see of these people walking around and like opening themselves up for the viewer. They're beautiful, not like today's medical illustrations where it's a bright color photograph that's like super up close of something gross.
Yeah, I mean, it really shows too. I've seen a lot of your work where it will have like a beautiful figure, that gaze that you speak of, but then also like their chest will be opened up and there'll be like some anatomical parts, but there might also be like other things like flowers or like it's really lovely.
Caitlin has a lot of her work at Spinario Design. I think in part, because it is for sale, but also, you got to keep all this art somewhere, right?
Yeah,
the studio is only so big. There was a funny little man that came into the store one day, though, and he said, "Who did that painting?" And I was like, "Oh, that was my Caitlin Koralczyk and blah blah blah." I'm trying to sell, And he goes, "That's disgusting. It's terrible. It's horrible." And I said, "Well, she did that one over there too, and in the back room you can find more."
So in the back room are the really horrible ones.
So he goes back there, and he was back there for like a long time.
Yeah.
And he comes in and goes, "I just can't believe she would make something so despicable and so horrible." And then he went back in the back room, and I was like, "Well, apparently she's doing something here."
Go see more. Despicable art.
It stirred something within himself.
Yeah.
But I don't want listeners to get the wrong impression either.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely, my reaction to your work is that it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think
most people with taste and who are educated love my art.
There you go. There you go. Hey,
when I win the lottery, I'll buy one.
I know, me too. Well, and that's the other thing too, is that I know that you have a hard time with that because your paintings take so long to make. Like you're working with oil paint and you're working for months on one piece. And so you have to be able to charge the appropriate price. But that
I spend a lot on art supplies, and when you crunch the numbers, it's like I'm making not that much money, although I do sell quite a bit of work. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's tough.
It's tougher than just being an illustrator, perhaps. They're like being someone who works with really fast mediums. Yeah. It's just a different world. But so you have, you own Spinario Design with your partner Peter in St. Paul. That's what is the address for Spinario?
It's technically in Minneapolis. It's at 3338 University Avenue Southeast, and it's right off of 280 in University, where it's in the same building as Cupcake in Art and Architecture. Yeah. And we are on the second floor.
And that's where, and both you and Peter have like this long-standing love of collecting beautiful objects.
Yeah, we're both big collectors, and that's how it all started out, and also how our relationship started out, because I used to deal in vintage photography, and that's what I was collecting and selling, and I would sell a lot of it online, and then I started selling Peter's stuff online, I used to do what mostly Tim does now at Spinario, because now I'm painting more, luckily. But and that's how Spinario got started. Because we'd rented a space, because I was like, I need an art studio, and I had all these girls that I graduated with, and we were all gonna get a studio together. And then, of course, I'm looking at studios, and I'm like, I found one, and they're all like, oh, we're not going to do that. We're going to buy a car instead, or this or that. So I had no one to get a studio with, and it was too expensive to get one by myself. So Peter was like, oh, well, we can do eBay out of half of it, and then the other half can be your studio. And I was like, okay. And then we started selling stuff on Craigslist, like furniture, and then it just grew into Spinario.
And some of your like collectibles actually make their way into your work.
Yeah, because I collect, obviously, the vintage photography. So I actually have a huge collection of 19th century post-mortem memorial photography. So it's mostly of children after they've passed. But I also I love 19th century photography that's just beautiful or interesting or weird. And especially, really my number one thing at this point is vintage medical photography. That's my favorite. And then I also have a really big collection of gay erotica from like the 40s to the 70s. And I use that a lot in my work as well.
Wow.
And then, of course, objects. So I just anything that's interesting, I kind of collect. I have a cabinet of curiosities.
I would love to see that sometime, too. And your studio, so you got a studio in Northeast, too, that's really fun to see also in the Solar Arts Building.
Yep.
How long have you been there?
probably been there for like 3 years already, but I've been in Northeast Minneapolis for like 8 years or something, maybe more. It's been a long time.
So you've been through a lot of the changes at the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
And good and bad,
Yeah.
mostly good. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of different buildings now are showcasing art all the time. And
Yes.
Northeast is an amazing gem with tons of artists. But this past year, has it been a year, you've reached out and actually kind of expanded your horizon and started spending studio time in New York.
It's been over a year because I did the Bushwick Open Studios last year, and then I did it this year.
Okay, so it's like a year and a half you've been going out there every couple months.
Yeah, like I will spend a month or two out there.
So how did
usually
that
about
all
a month at a time.
How did that get started?
Well, my good friend Vicky, who is an artist as well, she's kind of like the only reason I'm able to afford to go out there because I like to go to the Armory show, and I got hooked up with some VIP passes. So I went to my friend Vicky and was like, hey, do you want to go to the Armory show? So then we started going to the Armory show, and then we got to know each other better and eventually got a studio together. And when I'm there, I get to stay in Soho, which is really great.
Yeah, that's super nice.
But then I stay in a fiberglass pod, though, so it's not that fancy. But it's the only way. It's literally a Japanese pod. Like it's. I think.
Okay, it's a dumpster on East.
Yeah, no, I could.
No, but I mean, so Vicky has this place that she's
Yeah.
had forever and ever
Yeah.
and ever, and she's made it into this comfortable place where like a couple people
yeah.
can stay
Yes.
in like a little tiny
Yeah.
studio.
Yeah.
So you've got a Japanese fiberglass pod, and that's your pod,
Yeah.
and that's how you can escape everybody, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's such
yeah.
small quarters.
Well, and also she's totally. I was talking to her, and she's open to having other guest artists.
That's cool.
So maybe in the future she could have a situation where she will rent part of her studio and her pod to a visiting artist.
Yeah,
So
that's nice.
People should get in contact with me if they're interested.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And so then you guys got a studio space in Bushwick. And
Yeah.
You've moved once, right?
Yes.
Okay, but you have a new space, and so is that part of like? Are they doing art crawls and all that kind of stuff out there?
They do the Bushwick Open Studios, which is huge, and it's kind of like Art World, but it's completely different. It's way more
Collectors, right?
well. I wouldn't say it's probably more curators, and I would say I've met a lot of curators. It's a really young scene, and it's huge. It's really cool, though.
That's exciting. I lived in Bushwick in 2001.
Wow.
I know. I paid, $600 for a room that I split with my husband. So it was $300 a month.
Was it really big?
Actually, the apartment was like $1,400 a month, and it was a 3-bedroom. It was great, but it was on the Halsey stop, which is 10 stops out.
Yeah.
And I'll never
seems
forget.
kind of expensive for back then.
Kind of, but it was big, and it was
Yeah.
just like part of those row houses or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget going into, and this was way before the area had been gentrified at all. And I went into a Mercado, and the clerk said in Spanish, "What are white girls doing in here?"
Oh,
and
yeah.
the other clerk said, "They're poor." I was like, well, they're right. It's true.
You just brought up a really interesting point because I've met one of the coolest people I've met in New York is Christopher Stout, and he does the Bushwick Art Critique Group, and they critique. Like I got to do a critique last year, and it was really great because it brought a lot of people to my open studio because they only featured 7 female artists for the Bushwick Open Studios, and I was one of them. And he just hosted another Bushwick critique group that featured born here artists. So it's actually artists who were born in Bushwick.
Oh, wow.
And that lived there. And it was a really interesting session. And it wasn't without its, like, it was on maybe could be uncomfortable for people because they were talking about the gentrification. And they were a little... some of the artists were kind of, like you are the person who's gentrifying
Right.
the area. But
it's an issue that should be sensitive.
It's a huge, long thing to go into, but it was really great. And it was great to meet those artists. And anyways, it's just a really great thing that's going on there.
It's a good scene. So you go out there every couple of months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've spent a lot of time there the last year, and we'll see what this next year brings. Cause it's just like the studio situation is constantly changing and the rent there is constantly going up and up and up.
So it gets hard to be sustainable for you to have all of these things going on here and then also be able to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can totally see the inspiration and the motivation to get out there and get your work in front of a different audience.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we have a lot of good collectors here, but it's something that we can always be working on because we have such a grant-based type kind of ecosystem, arts ecosystem here.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of artists saying that that's really challenging. So, like, grants are not something that you've really had, like, a strong focus on.
No, and it's not to say I haven't tried for any, like, you know, of course, the Jerome and the McKnight are super easy to apply for.
Yeah.
I've never done any real grant writing just because when I look at the kind of people who are getting the grants, their work is very usually more community-based, which I understand, but I don't want to drop everything I'm doing to be like, oh, I want to set up a community thing and have kids come and learn how to paint, and then I'll have a show at the end.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it's something that people are starting to talk about more. I mean, obviously, having the community be a part of the arts is like super important and should be a priority of these foundations and these different endeavors, but it does kind of isolate the experience of an artist just being able to work in their studio and produce new work. Like that, you know, that needs to be also just as important a priority, I believe.
Well, and they made that other, I don't know if this is still happening, but remember when people were traveling
that is
with their grants,
the
and
reality.
then some reporter wrote this horrible article that was all like, oh, artists are taking vacations on your money, on your tax money.
Right.
So then they made the rule that artists can't travel outside of Minnesota.
What do politicians do?
That's it doesn't even make any sense at all, because the artists are the one who are improving these communities. Like, if you look at Northeast, that's all because of the artists, and now the artists are getting priced out, and it's turning into this thing where, you know,
it's just hard to stay.
Like,
you can't stay.
like I leave the studio the other day, and there was like 5 Cadillac SUVs and a Mercedes and all these, and they were having their little, you know, experience in Northeast, which is great. But if it's not benefiting the artists, or it's only benefiting specific groups there, that the neighborhood is just changing, you know.
I feel like Northeast is benefiting the business with all the traffic that's coming in, but it's not really like feeding the artists. I've noticed a lot of people say that. So it's like great for the local business economy, but it's not feeding the artists.
Me personally, I've done Art Whirl several years in a row, and Art Whirl's great, and Nima does an amazing job, but it's changed so much, and the target audience is so much different. It used to be about going into artist studios, and now it's been like, let's go drink beer and eat food. And I almost feel like now they're coming into the studios to kind of be like, ooh, look at that weird girl. Look at
the monkey in the cage.
Or they'll be like, did you paint that? And like, my sales have fell substantially the last few years. I used to make quite a bit of money, and I used to have collectors come from out of state for Art Whirl, and they would not only buy from me, but buy from other people. I'm telling you, I've had a collector come and drop 10 grand at Art Whirl.
Wow.
And that person is not coming anymore because he can't handle the circus. And I've lost out on sales because of that.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Art Whirl, and this might sound weird after we just talked about MUMA, but I wish that musicians would have some solidarity with the visual artist on that one weekend.
Yes.
Because Art Whirl has turned into now, like, there's a stage on every other block, and it's bands that you can see play somewhere else the week before, the week
I think
after.
I think that they should have a separate music weekend.
They have it all the time. My point is that musicians should have solidarity with visual artists on this one weekend, and like if next year none of them would play Art Whirl until 10 p.m.
Yes.
So that the visual artists are not competing with like another show.
Well, and to be honest, the only reason I've done Art Whirl the last 2 years is because I did a performance piece with Jaime Carrera, and that was my outlet for. I felt like people were coming in and insulting me anyways. So, and I wasn't making as much money. So I thought, well, I should just do something fun and really weird. And that's exactly what I've done. And then it's like, then I get, you know, we always get press and we always get a crowd. And then like this last year we had a heckler. Some lady was like, pornographers. And we had security guards that had to remove her from the building. So that was probably the best thing that happened at Art Whirl this year for me.
Well, that is really cool, though. I mean, you do have to say, like, in Art Whirl's defense, that they've got this huge audience. But
Yeah.
that you know, these are real
Well,
issues
and like I
that
said,
people talk about.
yeah, they're doing a great job.
Right.
But maybe we don't have to include everybody.
Right.
Although you have very little control over it because it's kind of the building owners who choose
It's not
what's
just
going
one,
on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not just one entity making
Yeah.
decisions. So yeah, it's interesting to talk about. But then there's other things like the third Thursdays, right? Or what are
Well, they do First Thursdays.
First Thursdays, sorry.
And I haven't been able to do it as much.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of me personally, I've also found it to be kind of a drain on my time because the people who usually go, they kind of are looking for food and drinks and
an
then they
experience
plop,
more
yeah,
than
and they
just, like,
plop
collecting
down on your to be blunt, I feel like I'm opening up my studio to be sexually harassed by people for hours and I'm not getting paid for it.
Wow.
I mean, if I'm going to be a prostitute, I might as well be getting paid for it. And that's the issue that's been my issue with it. It's tough, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not criticizing anyone because all of those programs are great.
Well, and this is your experience.
Yeah.
But this is your experience.
Yeah.
So it's like fair to say like this is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, it's giving
and, yeah.
me like a huge amount of anxiety
Yeah.
to participate
You shouldn't
in
do
those
that.
anymore.
Yeah. So you're really, when you're here in Minnesota, like you are really interested in the individual collector who wants to select a piece and, you know, who values it and understands its value.
Well, I think the Minnesota, the thing that's great about Minnesota is you have a huge space to work and it's more affordable and I get a lot of work done here and I can have my dog at the studio and I can dump all my stuff in the hatchback. We're in New York. It's like, oh, should I have the rolling suitcase? And then I have to pull it through the subway and it's just everything is so hard there.
Yeah.
And here it's so much easier. So I do get, I get a lot of work done in New York too, but it's a different kind of work. And then you get fried and then you feel like if you're not networking every weekend, you're wasting your time and your money to be there. So it's
balancing the time that
Yeah.
you're creating work and meeting people is
it's really difficult. But then
makes sense.
here, I feel like it's easier to just kind of be a hermit and get your work done. And then you can ship anything out, you know, and just improve that web presence.
We talk about that on this show a lot. I hear this as a reoccurring theme that like as hard as Minnesota winters are, like they're kind of great for artists
Yeah.
because you just like, you don't have to leave your house and you like can just stay home for weeks or whatever. And you don't have to socialize because it's like 60 below. And as much as that sucks, it's like a great
Crank
excuse.
the heat and incubate.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's really nice.
Yeah. Well, so where can people see your work? Where can people look at stuff?
Well, right now, as Tim mentioned, there's some stuff at Spinario Design. And as always, I am displaying work at the Solar Arts Building.
And you have a website too.
Yeah.
What's your website?
It is studiosilente.com. I know there weren't a lot of website names left for me, but it's studio, SILENTI.com.
Awesome.
And then also I am on Facebook and you can follow me there. And as far as in-person shows, I'm trying to think what I have coming up in Minnesota, which is sadly not a lot.
Well,
I'm trying
you
to
can
think,
share.
but I have a show that I'm in New York in September. It's a group show at Gristle Gallery. It's curated by Samantha Levin, and it's about Henry. It's called Realms of the Unreal, and it's all the artists paying homage to Henry Darger.
Whoa!
So you
He's
have
one of
all
my
your little Vivian
favorites.
girls. Yeah, so I did 2 Vivian girl portraits, and I decided since I've already done hermaphrodites, I was going to go there again. Since
Nice.
all of his girls had penises, I was like, you know what? This probably won't sell, but I'm just going to do it. So I did because that's how he drew his girls. So I was like, well, I'll make mine with a penis too.
I
So
hope I get a chance to see those before they
I'll
get
show you.
shipped
I
out to New
actually
York.
just took pictures of them
Yay.
yesterday, so I can show you. And then there's a show probably in October or November, and I don't think I'm allowed to say specifics yet because I never know when something's going to happen for sure. But it's a group show in Manhattan at the home of a well-known fashion designer.
Nice.
And it's a really great young curator, and that would be October or November, and I'll post more information about it when I can. And then I'm showing in Belgium, in Ghent, they named this show Postmortem, but it's a part of the Fabrica Vitae traveling anatomy show, and it's paying homage to Vesalius, the illustrator. And that's traveling all around Europe, and then it's coming back to the U.S., and that'll be in D.C., I think, next year.
Wow.
So
That's really
they're all
exciting.
group shows.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you can find out more Caitlin Krolchuk on Facebook or her website, studiosalenti.com. Thanks a lot, Caitlin. This was a fun conversation. Thank you, Tim Carroll, for joining us, and Lisa Lee Polivka. We are trying to get the word out about this new archiving project that you have called MUMA. You can find MUMA, M-U-M-A, on Facebook, or you can hit up Lisa Lee or Tim to talk about if you have those magnificent treasures of archives of Minnesota underground music. They're your people here. So thanks, everybody, for joining us for episode 5 of Joan of Art. Next week, we're going to have 3 more guests. It'll be equally exciting. And so I thank you for listening in, and I can't wait for next week's show. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more people that you know, more people that you know, more people.